The Entity is a 1982 released supernatural horror directed by Sidney J. Furie.
It's based on a book of the same name, which in turn is based on real-life cases of a woman called Doris Bither. Barbara Hershey plays Carla Moran, who has a seemingly happy life, although quite busy. She's suddenly attacked and raped by an invisible assailant. She initially sort of convinces herself that it was just a very vivid nightmare, because what other explanation could there be? But suddenly this entity then engages in sort of violent poltergeist type activity, and then appears to take control of her car, which nearly kills her. So in desperation, she visits a doctor played by Ron Silver, who believes her problems are all psychological, and sort of starts to dig into her troubled past for answers. But meanwhile, the attacks continue.
So, well, welcome to our new theme, new month, October. So it's Halloween, the month of Halloween. And we have entered a new territory, a new theme. I just make that sound really dramatic. because this month we've chosen ghosts, things that go bump in the night, spooky apparitions and all the above. Which is great for me because I'm such a scaredy cat when it comes to films like this. And I've got to watch them alone, although my girlfriend did say she might come around and hold my hand. Bless. I mean, I really am. I've always had like such an overactive imagination that, I mean, for me, I know The Exorcist isn't a ghost film, but I saw that I saw a lot of these kind of films when I was very young. So I think they kind of stuck in my psyche somewhat. And I mean, The Exorcist I can't watch to this day. It's too terrifying, that film. But films with ghosts, I have a bit of a hard time with them. They freak me out. But again, I saw a couple of standout ones that we're not doing. The Lady in White is one that stands out for me. We're not doing that one. I won't watch that one again. But there are scenes in that film that absolutely terrified me as a child. But then that's a good thing, because if the film works, then it's a good film if it works. And I've always enjoyed. I mean, I love horror films, and I've always enjoyed supernatural films. I don't believe in any of it myself, but that's the funny thing, isn't it? I don't believe in it. Yeah, I think we spoke about this when we did The Haunting, I think.
We've done quite a few ghost films, then we've done The Haunting and Changeling and A Ghost Story, and we did Ghost Watch. But yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I don't really believe in it, but I find them the creepiest kinds of films. I mean, I guess a lot of it is that all the best ones don't really show you very much.
No,
and it's all done on sort of noises and on what you can't see. They're much more creepy, I think, than showing everything. I think the problem with a lot of horror films, and particularly the ghost genre these days, is that they show you too much. And particularly when the ghost ends up being a wibbly wobbly CGI thing, it's not particularly scary. I'd rather see sort of a half visible shadow in the background, or something creepy at a window, or knocking at a door when there's nobody there. That's far scarier than some CGI mess.
Absolutely. I mean, I think when we did The Haunting, I mentioned, so I work in a castle, which is supposedly haunted. Now, I've never seen it. I've got colleagues who have certainly witnessed things. I did actually there was a day when I was there, I was in a passageway, and I felt someone walk down the corridor behind me, stop, and then step into the room that was to the side. And I looked over, and there was nothing there. And I swear blind that someone walked up behind me. Now, I was also absolutely shattered. I'd worked like 7 days in a row. I was tired. I put it down to that. I'm one of those people that, which is kind of sad, I think, that I have answers for all these events. Because, I do love spooky films. But, if I saw something...
Well, the alternative is there's loads of invisible people wandering around us all the time.
Indeed. But I agree with you. I think, when these films don't show you things, it's a lot scarier, because it's suggestion, isn't it? And your mind fills in the blanks.
Exactly.
Which works well here. And that's what's going on in this film. We should probably talk about the actual film. It's very unnerving, this film. I mean, it came out, was it before or after? I think it was just after the Poltergeist, wasn't it? It's very similar to Poltergeist. In fact, it's very similar to a lot. It follows very similar kind of patterns and themes to a lot of other ghost films of this kind. A haunting in the home, someone has a haunting, they don't understand it, they go and seek out the help of either doctors or parapsychologists, and then they come into their home and they set up, experiments and cameras and things, and so it follows that pattern. But Poltergeist is great. I think that I've read a comment on the channel. I think you posted a picture of this, didn't you? And someone said
I posted a still from it, to give people a hint as to what we were going to cover.
Yeah, and I think was it Space Oddity? He mentioned he wasn't so keen on Poltergeist, which I mean I don't know why he doesn't like it, but I can maybe see why some people don't like it, because it's kind of got the Spielberg thing in it. It goes a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
At the end, although this kind of goes a little bit similar place. But what I like about this one is it's a dark film. This film, for most of the, I mean, obviously it's very violent. It features abuse, and it features an assault and a rape of a woman, which is a pretty heavy place to go. But it's very unnerving. The way this film is shot is very unnerving. It's very claustrophobic. I find this film. I find it quite isolating, because obviously, I mean, post Poltergeist, you've got this family and you have a man and a woman with a close relationship. Here you have a single woman living with her children, which is quite a lonely existence. That's what my mum had. That's what I had.
Well, she does have a boyfriend, because she has a boyfriend,
but he's never there. He's like on the road all the time. You're never quite sure his story, which is a bit odd because he's much older than her as well, which is an odd thing. It's not an odd thing, but
well, I don't think it was particularly odd for films at that time, was it? I think we've mentioned this before, where young actresses are often sort of paired up with older actors.
men. Yeah, exactly. Which is quite. It feels a little bit off, but but I just find this one. It's very unnerving. This film. I mean, this film feels to me, tonally, it feels a bit like The Exorcist. This one, which kind of sends shivers up my spine a little bit, possibly for that reason. But I really like this film. Barbara Hershey she's so good in it. I mean, we spoke about her when we did Falling Down. I think that's the only time else we've spoken about her. She's really good here, though. She's on screen a lot of the time. It is her film, but there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of close-up shots in this, very close-up shots. She's like talking to her friend, and her face fills out the entire screen, and you'll have quite a long dialogue scene. The camera doesn't cut too often. And she holds it, and you totally believe in her. I mean, obviously in this film, the suggestion is it is taking place. It's based on a real incident. Like I said, I don't really believe in these things, but some people do, and a lot of people have seen things. So whether or not
there's photographic. Yeah, I was going to say photograph. Well, it is photographic evidence of things that occurred, like these arcs of light and stuff, which it wasn't just a couple of people witnessed. It was it was a whole room full of people, and they all saw these things take place. So I mean, the sort of idea of mass hysteria gets mentioned a couple of times in this film, and I mean, yes, I don't doubt that these things happen, but particularly when most of these people that witness these things are sort of scientists of some form or another, it seems unlikely that they all get caught up in the same hysterical moment and witness the same thing.
Yeah, that's what's quite interesting here. They mentioned it because when she first goes to see this doctor played by Ron Silver. He's like he's a psychologist.
He's a psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist, yeah. And then of course she then is introduced completely by accident. She's at a book shop with her friend, and she's like looking at books about ghosts and poltergeist and the occult and things like that, and there are these two men the other side of the aisle talking about researching people but not being able to find someone, and she kind of she stands up and said, yeah, I've had all those things happen to me. But of course these two men work at the same institute, the same university that Ron Silver's character works at, so of course they are all scientists, just in very different forms of science and medicine, but of course they're against each other, which is kind
of sort of psychology versus parapsychology.
Totally, yeah, and it's played out in this film, which is really cool. But obviously, they've studied for years, these parapsychologists, so there must be something. There's clearly something there that's going on.
I mean, I think obviously, as the audience, we witness what's happening to her. Although, you could still say, well, it's still in her head. But then, obviously, when it happens in front of her children and her son is thrown back and then he's got sort of lightning coming out of his hands and things like that, then it's like, well, this isn't, this is not in her head. There's all sorts of various excuses given as to what's going on. And like I said, Ron Silver, talks to her about her childhood, and it turns out, she didn't have a great childhood, and obviously she's, her kids are from different fathers, and quite traumatic upbringing and sort of early life. And that sort of is what he thinks is the root cause of her issues. But of course, he's not witnessing any of these events. She's kind of really struggles to be believed.
Yeah, I think that's apparently, I was reading that's quite an old hat. There's a bit of a kind of a Freudian look at, when they start going into her past lives and the sexual repression and all that kind of stuff. I think that whole diagnosis is a little bit old hat, and it's kind of one of the last times this was used in film. Maybe was that kind of the Freudian diagnosis of her and her past, and that kind of being the kind of thing that where this comes from, and being in her head and all that kind of stuff. So I think if there's any negativity to this film, it's maybe that part. But obviously, it's an early 80s film. We've moved on since then. It's one of those films that to me feels quite believable because the way it's shot and the way it's acted very realistically. I mean, there are many films since this film and Poltergeist. A lot of, is it like Conjuring and Insidious, and I think Barbara Hershey's in Insidious, isn't she?
She is, yeah.
So there are many. We're kind of oversaturated with these kind of films now, and they all follow similar patterns. I haven't watched many of them. Didn't one of them come over here and do the Enfield story, which of course Ghostwatch itself kind of sends up slightly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the famous British one as well. They follow similar themes, like I said at the beginning. But for this one, it worked for me. This one, the ending it goes a little bit.
The ending is it gets a little bit over the top, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's one of the troubles I have with a lot of horror films, is that they hold you for most of the film, and then you get to the end, and you've got to have that big ending. And sometimes it kind of lets you, a lot of the times it lets you down. There are very few horror films that hold me right to the end. It's a great film. It's a good romp, this. It's got, it's got a great cast. I really like its direction. I love the way it's directed. Like I said, it feels claustrophobic.
Yeah.
You're obviously in when you think of ghost films, you tend to think of like old houses, castles, big old British houses and stuff. You don't think of a small house in the middle of Los Angeles, a normal suburban house, exactly. So you kind of feel more safe because you've got loads of neighbours around you, but no.
And most of the time, she's not even alone in the house, is she? Her kids are in... It's not a big house, so they're not far away. But obviously, this entity attacks, shuts doors and things so they can't be opened. And there's a couple of moments you think, why haven't you called out? Because her son is sort of... is he like 16, 17, I think he's supposed to be. So, although I suppose he does try and help her at one point, doesn't he, and gets thrown back. So I guess what's the point of calling for him? But she's just in a normal house, not even alone. She's still suffering these horrendous attacks.
And that's what it is. They are pretty horrendous. It's I think was the film rated X when it was released, because it's quite, there are moments in here. Obviously it is a woman being attacked sexually, and it certainly, there are moments where it does show certain things, and it's like, I remember being quite uncomfortable when I first saw it, and it is an uncomfortable viewing.
I think when it was released in the UK, there were some women's rights groups who sort of protested against it because of its portrayals of sexual abuse and things like that. But it's like, well, it's not portrayed in a glorifying or
no, not at all,
of titillating manner, is it? It's portrayed as being awful and horrendous.
Yeah, exactly.
Traumatized and ashamed and all those sorts of things by it. Even she goes sort of through different stages. She's in sort of disbelief and denial, and then then terrified, and then she sort of is almost accepting of it, and because she doesn't want to be attacked, she almost like gives in at one point and considers just letting it happen so she's not beaten up and thrown around the room. It's not not portrayed in a pleasant way in any fashions.
And I think that for me is perhaps why the ending, it certainly is not a letdown, the ending, but because it kind of slips into Hollywood ending.
It's a bit sci-fi, doesn't it?
It's a little bit sci-fi-esque. It almost takes away from the rest of because it's such a strong film. And in fact, I think the director, Sidney J. Furie, said at the time he didn't envision it as being a horror film. But then, of course, you tack on that ending, it kind of does become an American, or it becomes a kind of, Hollywoodized kind of horror film, somewhat. But, it's fine. The ending's okay. It does an interesting thing,
I thought there was, quite a few interesting uses of the camera. There's a lot of sort of Dutch angles in there.
Yeah,
There's heavy use of sort of split focus.
Yeah.
In there, which that doesn't always work when it's used, but I found for the most part in this film it kind of did.
But you're right. Like I said, it feels there are lots of Dutch angles. Some very there's a scene where she's running a bath and it's it's completely tilted up. And then the next shot is maybe from further away and not quite as tilted. So it really kind of trip you up, I think, this film at times because of its strange angles, and it kind of gets closer and pulls you back, which I think, suggests that maybe something's coming that isn't going to be good. And there's an interesting moment where Barbara Hershey, she sits down and she looks in the mirror, and there are 3 mirrors, but of course the middle one, she's staring out at you. She's breaking the fourth wall, essentially. And she's kind of got this kind of somewhat non-emotional stare to her, which is a little bit unsettling as well, because obviously, they say that the eyes are the windows to the soul, and when people look at you, when people stare at you, it's a strange thing being stared at. Some people don't like being stared at. And if you've got a character in a film who's staring out at you, you know what's going on inside their head. It's a little bit unnerving, especially in a film like this. So I think that's what this, for me, works with this film. It's filmed in an interesting way. It's quite strange to look at. It throws you about, like she gets thrown about. And also, I found the colours. There are certain scenes in this film where the colours are quite interesting. There's a couple of scenes where she's talking to Ron Silver's character in his office, and there's like out the window, there's like these weird, it's like blurry and red out there, red colours, and the office is obviously quite clinical. And then outside, it's very distinctive that outside is like these kind of red colours, or there's blues as well. Whereas in the scene inside her home, it is just her home, but it feels like, I don't know, it's weird. Obviously later on in the film there is a scene that takes place on a set. I won't go too far with that.
Yeah.
And that obviously is a set. I don't know. The doctor's office at times is it's some quite strange. Yeah, there's definitely some strange film choices going on here.
The music's quite interesting as well.
Oh, I love the music in this.
There's a sort of a recurring theme when these attacks happen.
Yeah.
The music was composed by Charles Bernstein. It's definitely a name I recognise, but I can't.
Well, he did Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, did he? Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. But what's great in this film is there is a very recognisable theme when she's being attacked and all through that. But there's also there's a very ambient throughout other moments of the film, just a very kind of an ambient drone through there, which I really like too. I think it's got a really good soundtrack and sound design in this film. It's very well. Sidney J. Furie is quite an interesting director who's Canadian, and he made a few films before emigrating to Britain. He came over to England in the 1960s. He did The Young Ones with Cliff Richard. He's another one, a bit like, we were talking about Lewis Gilbert last week, and he was a bit of a genre, jumped around genres and stuff. Sidney J. Furie did, he went on, he worked with people like Cliff Richard, and then he did like the Appaloosa with Marlon Brando. He did a great film called Little Faust and Big Halsey with Robert Redford and Michael J. Pollard, which is a bit of an unknown motorbike film, which is really great. The Boys in Company C, which is a little bit like, it's a bit Full Metal Jacket-esque, which is a great kind of Vietnam War film. But then, like the last 20 years or so, he's made loads of kind of straight-to-video type films. So it's kind of an interesting career he's had. He's not known for making horror films. He's not known for making war films, but he's done lots of different films in his life. So yeah, I think that helps. And I've often said before, I sometimes find that film directors that aren't known as horror filmmakers, if they make horror films. I mean, William Friedkin is not known as a horror filmmaker, but he made one horror film which was absolutely terrifying. And I think that's some of my favourite horror films are not made by people who are known for making. Do you know what I mean? I mean, even The Shining. The Shining is one of the a lot of people say it's one of the greatest horror films ever made. It's not made by a filmmaker who is known for making horror films.
No.
But obviously, when you get films that are made by people who are known for making horror films a lot, they kind of get a little bit boring and unoriginal sometimes. I don't know. But the other thing I thought was interesting about this film was there's a really interesting interview on YouTube I found with Dr. Barry Taff, who is the parapsychologist who worked on the original case. He researched the original case of this, and I think he was an advisor on this film. It's a fascinating interview. It was made, I think it was from the 1970s, and he's talking about a number of different cases. If you don't believe it, it's quite an interesting thing to listen to kind of get an idea of maybe what they've seen or why they research what they research. But he's talking. He talks about poltergeist as being kind of like children, like children entities, because they just want to like cause trouble and mess around and all that kind of stuff. He also talks about the containment of these entities, which of course is something that comes up in this film, which for me sounded a bit like, it's almost like these guys maybe were the inspiration behind something like Ghostbusters, because of course Ghostbusters is containment, the containing ghosts, and I've always wondered where that idea came from, and I don't know, who knows, but it's possibly was some inspiration for Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis when they wrote that film. I think the director, Sidney J. Furie, actually thought they were a bit like whacked out on drugs. He didn't believe a word of it. So, do we have this on? Do you have this on DVD?
I've got it on DVD. Yeah. Nothing on it apart from the trailer. I mean, there was Eureka released it on Blu-ray over here, but again, I don't think it's got any features on it. The one to go for, I think, is the Shout Factory, or Scream Factory rather, edition, which was released a couple of years ago. I keep meaning to pick it up, I just haven't yet. Imported stuff is getting more and more expensive these days, and I'm running out of space. But no, that's got commentaries and interviews, stuff like that on it. I mean, from what I've read, it probably could do with a remaster. The picture's fine, but it's it could be better. Whether it'll ever happen, I mean, it's quite a well-known film, but it is a bit of a cult film. So whether it'll ever get that sort of treatment, I don't know. Maybe one day. Yeah, for now, the Scream Factory one, if you can play Region A, is the one I would recommend.
Yes, yeah, it's a shame. I mean, I think it is a film that could, it's a great film, and there are a lot of fans of it out there. And it's not Poltergeist. It's similar to Poltergeist, but it's different. It's Poltergeist is. I mean, I quite enjoy.
It's a play bit more for fun, isn't it?
It's a more fun film.
It's got scary moments, but
it's got scary moments, but it's got fun moments, and it's kind of, it's almost like, well, not cartoon horror, but do you know what I mean? It's that kind of Spielberg-y. There's some fun moments in Poltergeist, but it's not. It's a different film to this one, I think. Like I said, I found this one tonally, to me, reminded me of The Exorcist. At times, it's not as scary as The Exorcist. I don't know. You might think The Exorcist is a bundle of laughs. I don't know, but
well, I mean, it got re-released in the cinema, didn't it? I think it was, I can't remember, early 2000s, I think, wasn't it?
The Exorcist.
But, yeah, I went to see it, and people were laughing.
Yeah.
So,
it didn't make me laugh.
No.
So that was The Entity, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Click the subscribe button over here, and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on social media, and join us again soon for another video.